legality of marriage for the purpose of procreation to the male-female procreative union as the normative pattern for all human sexuality. And exceptions to that rule were ruled out because they did not fit that normative pattern. That is explicitly Jesus' teaching. Now, he also speaks in multiple places about purity of heart, as being the goal of human sexuality, and lust as being the contrary vice that would exclude one potentially from the kingdom of heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And when you read in the larger New Testament context, purity refers very often to the question of sexual purity. And when you do the elaboration in the rest of the Pauline epistles, it's quite clear that impurity, sexual impurity, definitely includes, from St. Paul's perspective, homosexual relations. Right? Now, so all that is the case. But that's not where I'm going to leave you. I'm going to give you a lot more. Here is the fundamental problem with the so-called gay marriage debate in our civil society. And it's not whether Jesus mentioned it, right? It's not whether the traditional view is mean to gay people, or any of that, right? All that's irrelevant.
Yeah.
The fundamental question is, why is there an institution called marriage? And not in Christian society, in any society. If you go to examine maybe Theravadan Buddhist culture from the 2nd century A.D. in Sri Lanka, never heard of Jesus, they're going to have marriage. If you look at Vedic Hinduism, never heard of Jesus, they're going to have marriage. If you look into traditional African society, they don't know anything about Jesus, they know about marriage. Inuit society at the North Pole, no Jesus, lots of polar bears, and marriage. You know, like wherever you go in the world, there are only one or two historical examples from all of the cultures of the world throughout all of history that don't have something that corresponds to our understanding of marriage, meaning the union of a man and a woman for the sake of raising a family. Now, sometimes you'll find polygamy, you find matriarchal societies or patriarchal societies. You're going to find variations within the theme,
Mm-hmm.
but you're going to find the common element of a man and a woman together in some form of union for the purpose of raising a family and granting legitimacy and care to the offspring of that particular union. That's the common factor that you're going to find in all of these cultures. Why is there such an institution? Now, there are a lot of kind of social couplings that people have practiced throughout the centuries that no culture has ever sought to deem worthy or equivalent or in need of the same kind of legal or social protections as they do the male-female procreative union. So, for example, in ancient Greece, pederasty, that is the sexual union of an older man and a younger boy, was a highly valued social institution. And when you read the works of Plato, Plato makes reference to pederasty in just about every dialogue, all the time, constantly. It's constantly in your face when you're reading Plato. And the Greeks thought it was a good thing. They valued it. They thought that young kids could, this is absurd to me, but they thought, young men could learn something from their older lovers, and it was approved of, and Plato writes about it, and the Greeks approved it more or less, with some few exceptions. And yet, even though they had a high view of homosexual relations, even what we would consider to be child sexual abuse, and today would be prosecuted even in the most liberal parts of American culture, they never thought to call that marriage. They weren't prejudiced against homosexuals. In fact, they were a deeply misogynistic culture, and they thought that male homoerotic unions were more noble than the union of a man and a woman. So it implied absolutely no prejudice against homosexuality at all. And yet they never considered that union should be dignified in the way that marriage was. Today, I don't know, I think people really appreciate the union of that they have with their online video game partners. And for some people, that may be their primary social relation.
Mm.
Now, what I'm getting ready to say may be gainsayed in a moment, given the course of our civilization. But up
Okay.
until recently, no one has thought that we needed a Supreme Court case to determine whether or not we should dignify your multiplayer online role-playing video game with the privileges and dignities of marriage. Should you and your multiple online video game players be able to enter into a legal union that entitled them, say, to the adoption of children and to like frontline consideration for those kinds of roles in society, just in virtue of playing video games together? No. Now, the question is, why not? Why didn't the Greeks think that pederasty was the same thing as marriage? Why don't we think that tennis playing is the same thing as marriage, or multiple online role-playing games are the same thing as marriage? Why this union in particular? And, if you live in most places of the country, it is falling off a log easy to understand the answer. It's because only the union of the man and the woman has the capacity to bring forth new life. It is the procreative aspect of the male-female union that makes it where new people come from. This is what you do to replenish society. Now, all but the most pathological societies, and we're quickly becoming a pathological society, all but the most pathological societies recognize we need to produce offspring if we're going to continue as a civilization. Now, there is a profoundly misanthropic vein that runs through our contemporary Western culture that does not want to perpetuate the species, that wants to eliminate the human race, that hates civilization and wants it to die. And they speak openly about this, right? But barring that pathological position, most people recognize culture has an interest in preserving civilization. We need new people. And we don't want pathological people. We don't want psychopaths. We want people that have been raised and nurtured to become good citizens. That means they have to acquire the virtues. They have to acquire self-control. They have to have some kind of education. They need to be loved and cared for. Now let's think, who's in the best position to do that? I know, we'll farm these kids out to the online video game community. That's who will raise them. Wrong. Wrong. Even the Greeks didn't think that the pederastic union was where kids should be raised, by and large. Okay? A few exceptions to that as well. But by and large, the people who are best suited to actually do the raising of the kids and caring for them are the people who were responsible for bringing them into the world.
Of course.
And who would that be? Who would that be? The parents. One man, one woman. That's how they got there. And so this has nothing to do with prejudice. This has nothing to do with Christian bigotry. That has nothing to do with divine revelation. This has to do with nature. The reason there is such a union called marriage is because of the blindingly obvious fact that when men and women get into intimate union, babies tend to happen. And because of society's interest in preserving itself and replenishing itself and raising new citizens, every culture on the planet has hallowed and sanctified marriage as a special kind of union. Not because they hate gay people, not because they hate trans people, not because they hate tennis players or role-playing games, but because we have a particular interest in replenishing society. Now, what's gone wrong is that Americans and Westerners have forgotten why marriage exists. Contraception has a lot to do with this because it's made us forget why we have sexual faculties. And they have come to think, they've come to believe the very modern and very romantic lie that marriage exists to gratify either my erotic attraction or my sense of romance. And that marriage is there to establish me in a kind of friendship with my perfect life partner who was destined for me from all eternity, Yahoo, right? The subject of the romantic comedy film. They think that's what marriage is for. And therefore, if that's what it's for, what we're dignifying is not our capacity to procreate, our capacity to bear children and raise them, but what we're dignifying is the most adolescent form of emotionality. Namely, what is it that tickles my boat? Or floats my, wrong metaphor. Floats
close.
My boat,
Yes,
right? What is
yes.
it that floats my boat, right? Either romantically or erotically. And that is, of course, fleeting and changing and wispy and sure to fail. Which is why as soon as the romantic notion of marriage took hold in civilization, no-fault divorce went out the roof.
Sure did.
And so opposing gay marriage at the civil level is not out of hatred for gay people. It's out of a deep desire to preserve the welfare of kids and recognize that the people who brought them into the world are the ones who have the obligation to take care of them, and we should help them do that. So I want to give you a book to read. It's by Robert George, personal philosopher Robert George. The title of the book is Conjugal Union. Conjugal Union by Robert George. Good philosophical defense of the position that I just articulated.
Janice, thank you so much for